The alarm bells screamed through the corridors of the Starship Nexus Dawn. Red lights flashed on every wall as crew members rushed to their emergency stations. Captain Vexahai stood tall on the bridge, his green-scaled skin reflecting the warning lights. His yellow eyes focused on the main screen where a weak signal blinked. "Report," Captain Vexahai commanded in his deep voice. "Navigator." Thelmos clicked his insect-like fingers across his control panel. His compound eyes studied the data flowing across multiple screens. "Captain, we are receiving a distress signal from Kepler 442c. The signal is very weak, but it appears to be coming from the old research station." Dr. Yoon Minji looked up from her science station. Her dark hair was tied back as always when she worked. "That's impossible. Kepler 442c has been under quarantine for 5 years. No one should be alive down there." Security Chief Brondar growled low in his throat. The bear-like alien crossed his massive arms. "The Shadow Maw kills everything that lands on that planet. Every expedition team sent there has died." Captain Vexahai nodded slowly. "The planet is classified as Class X for a reason. The creature down there is the most dangerous predator known to the Galactic Council." Kim Daeho pushed through the bridge doors, his engineering uniform stained with grease and coolant. He had been working in the engine room when the alarm started. "Captain, what's the situation?" "We have received a distress signal from the quarantine world," Captain Vexahai explained. "But according to all records, no living being should be on that planet." Daeho moved to an empty console and pulled up the signal data. His human eyes studied the patterns carefully. "This looks like an automated distress beacon. See these repeating patterns? It's not a person sending this. It's a machine." Dr. Yoon Minji walked over to look at Daeho's screen. "You might be right. But what if someone is trapped down there? What if they can't send a proper message?" "The protocols are clear," Captain Vexahai said firmly. "No ship is allowed to land on Kepler 442c. The quarantine must be maintained." Daeho frowned as he studied the signal more closely. "Captain, with respect, what if there are survivors? What if someone has been trapped down there for days or weeks, barely alive?" "The Shadow Maw would have killed them by now," Brondar said. "That creature has never let anyone live for more than a few hours. But what if they found shelter? What if they're hiding?" Daeho asked. "We can't just ignore a distress signal." Captain Vexahai's scales darkened with anger. "Engineer Daeho, the quarantine protocols exist for good reasons. That planet has killed 47 researchers in the past decade. We will not risk this ship or this crew for what is likely a false signal." Daeho looked around the bridge at his crewmates. He had served with them for 2 years. They had become like family to him. But he couldn't ignore the possibility that someone needed help. "Captain, let me take a shuttle down. Just a quick reconnaissance mission. I can check the source of the signal and be back within 2 hours. "Absolutely not," Captain Vexahai replied. "The matter is closed." The bridge fell silent except for the humming of the ship's systems. Daeho nodded slowly, but Dr. Yoon Minji could see the determination in his eyes. She had known him long enough to recognize that look. 3 hours later, Daeho sat in Shuttle Bay 2, running through pre-flight checks on the small craft. He had disabled the tracking systems and overridden the launch protocols. He knew this would get him in serious trouble, but he couldn't live with himself if he didn't at least try to help. The shuttle launched quietly from the Nexus Dawn, while most of the crew was in their sleep cycle. Daeho set course for the surface of Kepler 442c, his hands steady on the controls despite his racing heart. The planet below looked beautiful from space. Green forests covered most of the continents, and blue oceans sparkled in the light of the system's yellow star. It was hard to believe such a peaceful-looking world held such danger. As Daeho descended through the atmosphere, he activated all the shuttle's sensors. The old research station appeared on his screens, sitting in a clearing surrounded by dense jungle. The distress beacon was indeed coming from there, just as he had suspected. The shuttle landed softly near the abandoned buildings. Daeho put on his environmental suit and checked his equipment one more time. He carried a medical kit, emergency supplies, and a plasma cutter for cutting through debris. He did not carry weapons because he believed they would only make the Shadow Maw more aggressive. The research station was in worse condition than the orbital scans had shown. Vines and roots had grown through broken walls. Equipment lay scattered and broken across the floors. But the distress beacon continued to blink, powered by a small solar cell that somehow still worked. Daeho found no survivors. The beacon had been triggered by seismic activity 3 days earlier, when a small earthquake had damaged some equipment. There was no one to rescue. He spent an hour documenting what he found and collecting data that might be useful for future research. Then he returned to his shuttle and flew back to the Nexus Dawn, hoping that his disobedience might be forgiven since he had gathered valuable information. But Captain Vexhai was waiting for him in the shuttle bay, along with Security Chief Brondar and the rest of the senior staff. The captain's yellow eyes burned with controlled anger. "Engineer Deho, you are under arrest for violation of Galactic Quarantine Protocol 77 Alpha." Dr. Yoon Minji stepped forward. "Captain, he was only trying to help. He found important data about the research station." "The law is clear, Dr. Yoon," Captain Vexhai replied. "Any person who lands on a Class X quarantine world without proper authorization must face the consequences." Deho removed his helmet and faced his captain. "I understand, sir. I accept full responsibility for my actions." Within an hour, the senior staff had gathered in the main conference room for an emergency tribunal. Captain Vexhai read the charges while the others sat in uncomfortable silence. "The Galactic Council has established clear protocols for quarantine violations," the captain explained. "Any individual who breaks quarantine on a Class X Predator world must be exiled to that world for a minimum of 90 standard days." Dr. Yoon Minji stood up quickly. "That's a death sentence. No one has ever survived 90 days on Kepler 442c. The law exists to prevent the spread of dangerous organisms and to discourage others from similar violations," Thelma said logically. "The punishment must be severe to be effective." Brondar shifted uncomfortably in his seat. The human was trying to save lives. His intentions were good. "Intentions do not matter under galactic law," Captain Vexhai replied. "We must vote." "All in favor of exile?" One by one, the senior staff raised their hands. Navigator Thelmos voted yes immediately. Security Chief Brondar hesitated, but finally raised his hand. The other department heads followed. Only Dr. Yoon Minji kept her hands down. "The vote is 6-1, Captain Vexhai announced. "Engineer Deho will be transported to the surface of Kepler 442c tomorrow at dawn." Deho sat quietly through the entire proceeding. When the vote was finished, he looked around the table at his friends and colleagues. "I understand your decision," he said calmly. "I knew the risks when I made my choice. I only asked for basic survival equipment and the chance to say goodbye to my quarters." Dr. Yoon Minji had tears in her eyes. "Deho, I'm so sorry. This isn't right." "It's okay, Minji," Deho replied with a sad smile. "Sometimes doing the right thing comes with a price. I'm willing to pay it." That night, as the Nexus Dawn orbited the deadly world below, the crew prepared to abandon one of their own to almost certain death. None of them could imagine that this decision would change everything they thought they knew about humans, predators, and the nature of survival itself. The morning sun cast long shadows across the jungle clearing as the shuttle descended toward Kepler 442c for the second time in 2 days. This time Kim Deho was not the pilot. Security Chief Brondar controlled the craft while Deho sat in the passenger section, his hands bound by energy restraints. Dr. Yoon Minji sat across from him, her eyes red from crying. She had volunteered to oversee the exile procedure, hoping to spend a few more minutes with her friend before leaving him to die. "The supplies are basic but adequate," she said quietly, checking the equipment packs one more time. "Water purification tablets, emergency rations for 10 days, a basic shelter kit, and medical supplies." Deho nodded calmly. "Thank you for making sure I have what I need." "It's not enough," Minji whispered. 10 days of food won't help you survive 90 days. "I'll figure something out," Deho replied with a weak smile. "I always do." The shuttle touched down near the ruined research station. Through the small windows, they could see the dense green jungle stretching in all directions. Somewhere in those trees lived the creature that had killed every human who had ever set foot on this world. Brondar opened the rear doors and stepped out first, his weapon ready. The jungle was eerily quiet. No birds sang, no insects buzzed. Even the wind seemed afraid to make noise on this deadly world. "The Shadow Maw might be watching us right now," Brondar said nervously. "We need to move quickly." Deho stepped out of the shuttle and breathed the alien air for the first time without a helmet. It smelled of flowers and decay, life and death mixed together. The air was warm and humid, making his clothes stick to his skin immediately. Minji helped carry his supplies to the research station ruins. The main building still had most of its walls and a roof that only leaked in a few places. It would provide basic shelter from the rain and wind. The previous expedition left some equipment behind, Minji explained as they walked through the broken doorways. Maybe you can use some of it. Inside the main building, scattered across rusted tables and broken chairs, lay the remains of scientific instruments. Computers that would never work again, sample containers filled with strange plants, and personal items left behind by researchers who had died here years ago. Daeho picked up a damaged tablet and examined it carefully. Some of this might still be useful. The solar chargers look intact. Daeho, Minji said suddenly, grabbing his arm. I've been studying all the records about the Shadow Maw. Every report, every survivor account from the first few minutes before people died. What did you find? The creature is intelligent. Very intelligent. It doesn't just kill randomly. It seems to study its prey first, sometimes for hours or even days. Brondar called from outside. We need to leave now. Captain's orders were to drop him off and return immediately. Minji hugged Daeho tightly. Be careful, be smart. Don't try to fight it. I won't, Daeho promised. I'll try to understand it instead. The shuttle lifted off 10 minutes later, leaving Daeho alone in the clearing. He watched it disappear into the blue sky above, carrying away his last connection to safety and friendship. For the first time since his trial, Daeho felt truly afraid. Back on the Nexus Dawn, the crew struggled with what they had done. Captain Vexhai stood on the bridge, staring at the planet below through the main viewer. His scaled hands were clasped behind his back, and his usual confident posture seemed slightly bent. Captain, Navigator Thelmos reported, the shuttle has returned safely. The exile has been completed according to galactic protocols. Thank you, Navigator, Captain Vexhai replied without turning around. Set course for the Centauri research station. We have other duties to attend to. But even as he gave the order, the captain felt a weight in his chest that he had never experienced before. He had sentenced many criminals during his long career, but this felt different. Daeho was not a criminal. He was a good person who had made a mistake trying to save lives. Dr. Yoon Minji returned to her laboratory but could not concentrate on her work. Instead, she pulled up every file the Galactic Council had about Kepler 442c and the creature they called the Shadow Maw. The first expedition to the planet had lasted 6 hours before all contact was lost. The second expedition found their bodies scattered around the research station, torn apart by something with incredible strength and sharp claws. The third expedition lasted 2 days. They had better weapons and more experience with dangerous creatures. Their final transmission spoke of a creature that moved like liquid shadow, appearing and disappearing without warning. The fourth expedition brought heavy weapons and military soldiers. They lasted 4 days before the Shadow Maw killed them all. Every expedition after that had failed. 47 people had died on this world, and now Daeho would be the 48th. Minji read through the reports again and again, looking for any clue that might help her friend survive. One detail kept appearing in every account. The Shadow Maw never attacked immediately. It always observed first. It's studying them, she whispered to herself. But studying them for what? Down on the planet's surface, Daeho had spent his first day organizing the research station ruins. He cleared debris from the main room, set up his shelter kit in the most protected corner, and inventoried everything he could find. The previous expeditions had left behind more than scientific equipment. He found personal logs, written records, and even some food supplies that were still sealed and safe to eat. As the sun began to set, painting the jungle in shades of orange and red, Daeho read through the final log entries of Dr. Sarah Chen, the leader of the fourth expedition. Day 3 on Kepler 442c. The creature is still watching us. We can feel its presence even when we cannot see it. Martinez thinks it's waiting for us to make a mistake. Rodriguez believes it's trying to understand our technology. I think it's deciding which of us to kill first. Day 4. It took Rodriguez last night. We found pieces of his equipment scattered near the river, but no body. The creature is incredibly intelligent. It disabled our perimeter sensors without triggering any alarms. We never heard Rodriguez scream. The final entry was written in shaking handwriting. It's here, in the station with us. I can see its eyes in the darkness like stars that have gone cold. If anyone finds this log, know that we tried to fight. We tried to survive. But this creature is not just a predator. It's something much worse. Deho closed the log file and looked around the dark room. His small lamp provided the only light, creating dancing shadows on the broken walls. Somewhere outside in the jungle, the Shadow Maw was waiting. But instead of fear, Deho felt curiosity. Every account described a creature that observed and studied its prey. That meant it was intelligent enough to learn and possibly intelligent enough to communicate. "Hello," Deho said quietly into the darkness. "I know you're out there. I know you're watching me. My name is Kim Deho and I'm not here to hurt you." The jungle remained silent, but Deho could feel something listening, something ancient and patient and very much alive. On the third night, he saw it for the first time. Deho was sitting by his small fire eating a meal of emergency rations when the shadows near the edge of the clearing began to move differently. At first he thought it was just the wind stirring the leaves. Then he realized the wind had stopped completely. The shadow detached itself from the darkness between the trees and flowed across the ground like liquid night. It was huge, at least twice the size of a human, with a shape that seemed to change as it moved. Sometimes it looked like a giant cat, sometimes like a wolf, sometimes like something that had no name in any language. 2 points of silver light appeared in what might have been its head, eyes that reflected the firelight like mirrors, intelligent and curious and completely alien. Deho set down his food and looked directly at the creature. "There you are," he said softly. "I've been waiting to meet you." The Shadow Maw tilted its head slightly, the same way a dog might when hearing an unfamiliar sound. It had expected fear, expected screaming, expected the same reaction every other human had shown. Instead, this strange human was looking at it with interest rather than terror. For the first time in 5 years, the Shadow Maw was confused. For 3 days, Kim Deho and the Shadow Maw watched each other. The creature would appear at the edge of the clearing each evening, its silver eyes studying the human who showed no fear. Deho would continue his daily activities, talking to it as if it were an old friend. "I found some interesting equipment today," Deho said on the 4th morning, holding up a damaged scanner. The previous team was studying the local plants. "Did you know some of these flowers can purify water? Your planet has amazing biodiversity." The Shadow Maw tilted its massive head, listening to the strange sounds this human made. Other humans had screamed or shouted commands at their weapons. This one spoke in calm, gentle tones. Deho noticed that the creature favored its left side when it moved. Years of engineering training had taught him to observe mechanical problems, and living beings had mechanical problems too. "You're hurt," he said softly, setting down his tools. "Something injured you," the creature's silver eyes narrowed. It remembered the pain from the 4th expedition, when the soldiers had used energy weapons against it. The wounds had healed slowly and never completely. Deho stood up carefully, making no sudden movements. "I'm not a doctor, but I know something about fixing things that are broken. May I take a look?" The Shadow Maw could have killed him in seconds. Its claws were longer than Deho's fingers and sharp enough to cut through metal. But something about this human's behavior was different from all the others. Instead of attacking or running away, the creature lay down at the edge of the clearing. It was still 20 meters away, but it was the closest it had ever come to a living human. Deho walked slowly across the clearing, his hands visible and empty. As he got closer, he could see that the Shadow Maw was even larger than he had thought. Its body seemed to be made of living darkness that shifted and flowed like water. "You're beautiful," he whispered in amazement. "I've never seen anything like you." The creature's form solidified as Deho approached, becoming more like a giant wolf with sleek black fur. 3 long scars ran along its left flank, old wounds that had healed badly. Deho examined the scars without touching them. Energy weapon burns. Those must have hurt terribly. The tissue didn't heal properly because pieces of the weapon discharge are still embedded in the wounds. He returned to the research station and gathered what he needed: medical supplies from his kit, tools from the abandoned laboratory, and a small cutting laser that could remove foreign objects from wounds. The Shadow Maw waited patiently as Deho worked. For the first time in 5 years, it felt something other than loneliness and anger. This human was trying to help it, not harm it. "This might sting a little," Deho warned as he began removing the embedded energy fragments. "But you'll feel much better afterward." The creature remained perfectly still during the procedure. It could have killed Deho at any moment, but it sensed no danger from the gentle human who worked so carefully to heal its pain. When Deho finished, he applied antiseptic and bandages to the cleaned wounds. "There, that should heal much better now." The shadow maw stood up and tested its movement. For the first time in years, the constant pain in its side was gone. It looked at Deho with something that might have been gratitude. "You're welcome," Deho said, understanding the look perfectly. That night, the creature did not disappear into the jungle. Instead, it curled up near the research station, close enough to protect the human who had shown it kindness. Meanwhile, aboard the Nexus Dawn, Dr. Yoon Minji had made a disturbing discovery. She had been monitoring the planet's surface with long-range scanners, and the readings made no sense. "Captain," she reported to Vexhai, "I'm detecting 2 life forms at the research station coordinates. Both are alive and both appear to be healthy." Captain Vexhai studied the data with confusion. "That's impossible. The human should be dead by now, and there should be only one large predator on the entire planet." "The readings are consistent, Captain. Whatever is happening down there, Kim Deho is still alive after 7 days. Navigator Thelmos calculated probabilities on his console. The statistical chance of survival past day 3 is less than 1%. No human has ever lived this long on Kepler 442c, Security Chief Brondar growled thoughtfully. Maybe the creature is playing with him. Some predators like to torture their prey before killing. But Dr. Yoon Minji had a different theory. She had been studying human behavior for years, and she knew something about her species that the others did not understand. "Humans have a unique ability," she explained to the senior staff. "We can form bonds with other species, even ones that should be our natural enemies. On Earth, humans have made companions of wolves, horses, and even creatures that were once deadly predators." "You think the human has befriended the Shadow Maw?" Captain Vexhai asked in disbelief. "I think it's possible. Kim Deho is an engineer. He sees problems and finds solutions. Maybe he didn't see the Shadow Maw as an enemy to fight, but as a problem to solve." Back on the planet's surface, Deho and his new companion were indeed solving problems together. The creature's incredible strength allowed it to move heavy debris that Deho could never handle alone. Deho's knowledge of technology let him repair equipment that improved both their lives. "I'm going to call you Grim," Deho announced one morning as they worked together to clear a blocked water channel. "It's short for Grim Reaper, but also because you look so serious all the time." The creature that was now called Grim made a sound that might have been amusement. It had learned to recognize different tones in the human's voice, and this tone meant friendship. Deho had been teaching Grim simple communication using symbols drawn in the dirt. A circle meant water, a square meant food, a triangle meant danger. Grim learned quickly and began adding its own symbols to the growing language they shared. "You're incredibly intelligent," Deho marveled, as Grim drew complex patterns in the ground. "These symbols look almost like writing. Did your species have a written language?" Grim's silver eyes grew sad at the question. It drew a new symbol, one that Deho had not seen before. A broken circle with lines radiating outward like a dying sun. "That means alone, doesn't it?" Deho asked gently. "You're the last one of your kind." Grim touched its nose to the symbol and then looked up at the stars that were beginning to appear in the darkening sky. For 5 years it had been the only member of its species on this entire world. "I'm sorry," Deho said, putting his hand carefully on Grim's massive head. "I know what it's like to be alone. But you're not alone anymore. I'm here now." The bond between human and predator grew stronger each day. Deho learned that Grim's species had once built cities in the deep jungle, structures so advanced that they seemed to blend perfectly with the natural environment. Grim showed him hidden pathways through the forest and underground chambers filled with strange technology. "Your people were engineers too," Deho realized as he studied the alien architecture. They understood how to work with nature instead of against it. Grim led him to a vast chamber deep underground where walls were covered with symbols and diagrams. Some looked like star charts, others resembled complex mathematical equations. All of it was far beyond anything the previous human expeditions had discovered. "This is incredible," Deho breathed, running his hands over the carved symbols. "This knowledge could change everything we know about biotechnology and environmental engineering." But Grim drew the broken circle symbol again, reminding Deho that all this knowledge meant nothing if there was no one left to use it. "Maybe there's a way to preserve it," Deho suggested. "Maybe we can make sure your people's wisdom isn't lost forever." As the weeks passed, their partnership became so natural that neither could imagine life without the other. Grim brought Deho food from the jungle and materials for building better shelters. Deho created tools that made both their lives easier and began documenting the incredible technology they found in the underground chambers. They had become an unlikely team. The abandoned human engineer and the lonely last survivor of an ancient civilization. Neither knew that their friendship was about to change the course of galactic history. After 30 days on Kepler 442c, Kim Dae-ho had built something remarkable. With Grimm's help, he had constructed a small complex of buildings using both human engineering and the ancient alien technology they found in the underground chambers. Solar panels powered computers that translated the alien symbols. Water flowed through channels carved from living rock that seemed to purify themselves. Gardens grew in perfect harmony with the jungle, producing food that tasted better than anything Dae-ho had ever eaten. "Your people understood something we never learned," Dae-ho said, as he and Grimm walked through their thriving settlement. They knew how to live with nature instead of trying to control it. Grimm made the sound that Dae-ho had learned meant agreement. Its people had spent thousands of years developing technology that worked with natural systems rather than against them, but that knowledge had died with them when the plague came. Through their growing communication system, Grimm had told Dae-ho the story of its species. They had been peaceful explorers and builders, spreading across the galaxy to create beautiful cities on hundreds of worlds, but a deadly sickness had followed them. A plague that killed entire populations in days. Grimm's world had been one of the last to fall. The survivors had sealed themselves away, hoping to wait out the plague, but one by one they had died. Grimm had been the youngest and somehow the only one to survive. "The other expeditions," Dae-ho said one morning as they worked together to expand their translation computer. "You weren't trying to kill them, were you? You were trying to communicate." Grimm drew the symbol for sadness in the dirt. Every time humans had come to its world, Grimm had tried to make contact. It had approached their camps carefully, hoping to finally have someone to talk to after years of loneliness. But the humans had always attacked first. They saw a large predator and assumed it meant to kill them. Their weapons had hurt Grimm, and in self-defense it had fought back. Each time the humans had died, and Grimm had become lonelier and more desperate. "Until I came along," Dae-ho said, understanding the tragedy of it all. "I was the first one who didn't try to shoot you." Grimm touched Dae-ho's hand with one massive claw, a gesture they had developed that meant friendship. For the first time in 5 years, it had someone who understood it. That afternoon, as they worked on improving their water purification system, Grimm led Dae-ho to a section of the underground chambers he had never seen before. The walls here were covered with different symbols, ones that seemed to glow with their own light. "These are different," Dae-ho observed, running his scanner over the glowing markings. "They're not historical records. They're technical specifications." The symbols described biotechnology so advanced that it seemed like magic. Plants that could clean polluted air in minutes, seeds that could grow in toxic soil and make it fertile again, microorganisms that could break down plastic and metal waste into harmless compounds. "This is the solution to environmental problems that have plagued the galaxy for centuries," Dae-ho whispered in amazement. "Your people developed clean technology that could save entire worlds." Grimm made a complex series of sounds that their translation system was still learning to interpret. But Dae-ho understood the meaning. This technology could help millions of beings across the galaxy, but only if someone could learn to use it properly. "We need to contact the Nexus Dawn," Dae-ho said suddenly. "Captain Vexhai and the others need to see this." But their communication equipment was limited to short-range transmissions. The ship was too far away to receive their signals with the basic systems they had available. Grimm had an idea. It led Dae-ho deeper into the underground complex to a chamber that hummed with barely contained energy. Ancient machines lined the walls, their purposes mysterious but their power undeniable. "This is your people's communication center," Dae-ho realized as he studied the alien technology. "It's been dormant for years, but the power systems are still active. Working together, human engineering knowledge and alien intuition, they began the careful process of reactivating the ancient communication array. It took days of patient work, connecting human computers to alien systems, learning how to make two completely different technologies work as one. Finally, on their 35th day together, they succeeded. The chamber filled with harmonic tones as the ancient machines came to life. Screens displayed star charts showing the positions of ships throughout the local star system. "There," Dae-ho said, pointing to a moving dot on the display. "That's the Nexus Dawn." They composed their message carefully. Not just a distress call, but a comprehensive data package including everything they had learned about Grimm's people and their incredible technology, mathematical proofs, scientific data, and most importantly, video recordings showing human and alien working together in perfect harmony. When they transmitted the message, it went out with power levels that dwarfed anything in the Nexus Dawn's technology. The signal reached the ship in minutes, impossible to ignore and impossible to dismiss as a fake. Aboard the Nexus Dawn, Dr. Yoon Minji was the first to receive the transmission. She stared at her screens in shock as data flowed in faster than her computers could process it. "Captain," she called over the comm system, "you need to see this immediately." The senior staff gathered on the bridge as Minji displayed the incoming message. The main screen showed Kim Dae-ho standing next to the creature that had killed 47 previous visitors to the planet. But instead of fighting or fleeing, they were working together on what appeared to be advanced scientific equipment. "This is impossible," Captain Vexhai said, his voice filled with disbelief. "The data is real." "Captain," Navigator Thelmos reported from his station, "the transmission power alone is beyond our current technology, and these mathematical proofs are unlike anything in our databases." Security Chief Brondar studied the video recordings carefully. The creature appears to be helping him. It's bringing him materials and assisting with construction. Dr. Yoon Minji felt tears of joy running down her face. He did it. Somehow Kim Dae-ho made friends with the most dangerous predator in known space. But the implications of the message went far beyond one human's survival. The technical data they were receiving described environmental restoration techniques that could save worlds. The biotechnology specifications could revolutionize medicine and agriculture across the galaxy. "Captain," Minji said quietly, "if this information is accurate, we're looking at the greatest scientific discovery in galactic history." Captain Vexhai stood in silence for a long moment, watching the impossible scene playing out on his main screen. The human he had condemned to death was not only alive but thriving. More than that, he had accomplished something no expedition in 5 years had managed to do. "Set course for Kepler 442c, the captain ordered. "Maximum speed." "Sir," Thelmos asked, "are we conducting a rescue mission?" Captain Vexhai looked at the data flowing across his screens, showing advances in technology that could benefit every species in the Galactic Council. "No, Navigator. We're conducting a first contact mission with a new civilization, and we're going to apologize to the human who made it possible." Down on the planet's surface, Dae-ho and Grimm watched their message transmission complete successfully. The ancient communication array powered down with a satisfied hum, its job accomplished after years of silence. "They'll come back," Dae-ho told his friend. "And this time they'll come in peace." Grimm drew a new symbol in the dirt, one they had been working on together. It showed 2 different shapes connected by lines of friendship. Human and alien, different species united by understanding and mutual respect. For the first time in 5 years, Grimm allowed itself to hope that it might not be alone much longer. The Nexus Dawn entered orbit around Kepler 442c, 53 days after abandoning Kim Dae-ho to die. Captain Vexhai stood on the bridge, staring at the planet below with very different feelings than he had experienced during their last visit. "Life signs confirmed." "Captain," Dr. Yoon Minji reported from her science station. 2 large life forms at the research station coordinates. Both appear to be in excellent health." "Energy readings are off the charts," Navigator Thelmos added. "They're using power sources we don't recognize, but the output is incredibly efficient." Security Chief Brondar studied his tactical displays with confusion. "Captain, I'm detecting what appear to be defensive systems around their location, but they're not targeting us. They seem designed to protect the local environment." Captain Vexhai nodded slowly. In the weeks since receiving Dae-ho's transmission, he had read every report about human behavior in the Galactic Council databases. What he learned had changed his understanding of the species completely. Humans were not just intelligent or resourceful. They possessed something unique among spacefaring species: the ability to form emotional bonds with creatures that should logically be their enemies. On their homeworld, they had turned wolves into companions, made friends of creatures that once hunted them. "Prepare a shuttle," Captain Vexhai ordered. "I will personally lead the landing party." "Captain," Brondar said carefully, "regulations require armed security for any landing on a Class X Predator world." "The regulations were written before we understood what we were dealing with," Captain Vexhai replied. This mission requires diplomacy, not weapons. Dr. Yoon Minji stepped forward. Captain, request permission to join the landing party. Granted. Navigator Thelmos, you will also accompany us. We need someone who can evaluate the technical data they've discovered. An hour later, their shuttle descended through the atmosphere toward the research station coordinates. But as they broke through the clouds, they saw something that made them all gasp in amazement. Where once there had been ruins and scattered debris, now stood a beautiful complex of buildings that seemed to grow from the jungle itself. Solar collectors disguised as flower petals powered systems, housed in structures that looked more like living trees than artificial constructs. Incredible, Thelmos whispered. The architecture appears to be a fusion of human engineering and completely unknown alien technology. Gardens surrounded the buildings, filled with plants that glowed softly in the afternoon sunlight. Clean water flowed through channels carved from living rock, creating a sound like gentle music. It's beautiful, Dr. Yoon Minji said softly. It looks like a paradise. The shuttle landed in a clearing that had been prepared specifically for visiting spacecraft. As the engines powered down, they could see Kim Dae-ho walking toward them, but he was not alone. Beside him moved the creature that had killed 47 people, but now it seemed completely different. Its movements were graceful rather than threatening, and its silver eyes showed intelligence and curiosity, rather than predatory hunger. Captain Vexhai was the first to exit the shuttle. He had expected to find a desperate survivor clinging to life on a hostile world. Instead, he found a man who looked healthier and happier than he had during their 2 years of service together. Captain, Dae-ho said with a warm smile, "Welcome to New Haven Colony. I'd like you to meet my partner, Grim." The massive creature stepped forward and made a sound that their translation devices interpreted as a formal greeting. It had learned to recognize the rank insignia of different species and understood that this was an important moment. Captain Vexhai fought against every instinct that told him to run. The creature was even larger up close, and its claws could have torn him apart in seconds, but its posture was peaceful, and its silver eyes held wisdom rather than malice. "Honored to meet you." "Grim," Captain Vexhai said carefully, offering a formal bow that was used between different species. Grim returned the bow perfectly, having learned the gesture from Dae-ho's cultural database. Dr. Yoon Minji ran forward and hugged her friend tightly. "Dae-ho, I was so worried. I thought we'd never see you again." "I'm sorry you were worried, Minji," Dae-ho replied, "but as you can see, I've been in very good hands. Or claws, I suppose." Navigator Thelmos was studying the buildings around them with his compound eyes. "The technology integration is remarkable. How did you manage to combine human and alien systems so effectively?" "Grim taught me," Dae-ho explained. His people understood engineering principles that we're only beginning to discover. They built technology that works with natural systems instead of replacing them. Grim made a complex series of sounds that the translation system converted to text on their displays. Grim says that his people always believed the best technology should be invisible, working in harmony with the world around it, rather than dominating it. Captain Vexhai looked around at the incredible settlement that had grown, where once there were only ruins. "This is beyond anything we expected to find. The data you transmitted has already caused major changes in Galactic Council policies." "What kind of changes?" Dae-ho asked. 3 other Class X quarantine worlds are being re-evaluated for possible peaceful contact missions. The Council has realized that we may have been making terrible mistakes in our first contact protocols. Grim led them on a tour of the settlement, showing them innovations that seemed impossible with current technology, plants that purified air so efficiently that the atmosphere around the settlement was cleaner than most space station environments, waste recycling systems that broke down organic matter so completely that nothing harmful remained. This biotechnology could solve environmental problems on hundreds of worlds. Dr. Yoon Minji marveled as she studied the living water purification system. "That's exactly what Grim's people intended," Dae-ho explained. "They were explorers and teachers, spreading helpful technology throughout the galaxy. But they were wiped out by a plague before they could share most of their knowledge." In the underground chambers, Navigator Thelmos examined the ancient computer systems with growing excitement. These databases contain scientific information that is centuries ahead of our current understanding. Mathematics, biology, environmental science, even theoretical physics concepts we haven't discovered yet. "Grim has been teaching me to read their language," Dae-ho said. We've only translated about 10% of their technical library so far, but every discovery has been incredible. Captain Vexhai found himself faced with a decision that would affect the rest of his career. The regulations were clear. Class X quarantine worlds were off-limits to all galactic civilization. But those regulations had been written by beings who never imagined that a deadly predator could become a willing teacher. Daiho, he said formally, by galactic law, your sentence of exile has been completed. You are free to return to the ship with us. Daiho looked at Grim, and something passed between them that needed no translation. Thank you, Captain, but I choose to stay. There's too much work to be done here, too much knowledge to preserve and share. And Grim? Captain Vexhai asked. Would you be willing to come with us to the Galactic Council? Your people's knowledge could help billions of beings. Grim's response was immediate and clear. It would not leave this world while so much of its people's legacy remained hidden and untranslated. Its duty was to preserve that knowledge and teach it to those who could use it wisely. Then we'll establish a permanent research station here, Captain Vexhai decided. With your permission, Grim, we'd like to bring scientists and engineers from across the galaxy to learn from you. The creature's silver eyes brightened with what could only be joy. For the first time since the plague had taken its people, there would be others to share knowledge with. The loneliness that had lasted for years would finally end. Dr. Yoon Minji stepped forward. Captain, request permission to transfer to the research station permanently. Granted. Anyone else who wishes to remain and study here is welcome to do so. As the sun set over New Haven Colony, 3 very different species sat together sharing a meal and planning for the future. The abandoned human had become a bridge between worlds. The deadly predator had become a teacher and friend. And the crew who had thought they were carrying out a death sentence had instead witnessed the birth of a new kind of galactic cooperation. Above them, the Nexus Dawn prepared to carry news of their discovery back to the Galactic Council. The story of the human and the Shadow Maw would soon spread across the galaxy, changing forever how different species approached each other in the vast darkness between the stars. 1 year after the discovery of New Haven Colony, Kepler 442c had become the most important research station in the galaxy. Ships from dozens of different species arrived weekly, bringing scientists, engineers, and diplomats eager to learn from Grim and study the ancient biotechnology. Kim Daiho stood on the observation deck of the new orbital station, watching shuttles ferry visitors to and from the planet's surface. The scared, abandoned engineer was gone, replaced by a confident administrator who had become the galaxy's leading expert on human-alien cooperation. The Andorian delegation is requesting another week to study the soil restoration techniques, Dr. Yoon Minji reported as she joined him at the viewing window. And the Centauri want to bring an entire university research team next month. What does Grim think about all the visitors? Daiho asked, happy mostly. After years of loneliness, Grim enjoys having so many different beings to teach and learn from. Though it did ask me to limit tour groups to 50 people at a time. Below them, the planet that had once been a quarantined death world now bloomed with carefully managed research facilities. The jungle remained pristine, but now it was home to laboratories that seemed to grow from the trees themselves. Using the ancient alien architectural techniques, Captain Vexhai approached them, carrying a datapad filled with reports from across the galaxy. In the years since their discovery, his career had taken an unexpected turn. Instead of commanding a research vessel, he had become the Galactic Council's special coordinator for peaceful first contact missions. The results from the Arcturus mission just arrived, he announced with satisfaction. The creatures we thought were attacking mining operations were actually trying to warn the miners about unstable ground conditions. Using Daiho's communication protocols, we established peaceful contact within hours. It was the 15th successful peaceful resolution of what had previously been classified as hostile alien encounters. The techniques developed by Daiho and Grim had revolutionized how the galaxy approached unknown species. Any word from the Vega system exploration? Minji asked. Even better news, Captain Vexhai replied. The species we've been calling the Devourers for the past decade aren't actually consuming planets. They're cleaning them, removing pollution and restoring damaged ecosystems. They've been trying to help us for years, but we kept attacking them. Navigator Thelmos emerged from the communication center, his compound eyes bright with excitement. Daiho, you have an incoming transmission from Earth Central Command. It's marked as highest priority. In the communication room, Admiral Lee Sun-hee appeared on the main screen. She was the highest-ranking human in the Galactic Defense Forces, and Daeho had never expected to speak with someone so important. "Engineer Daeho," Admiral Lee said with a respectful nod. "I'm contacting you on behalf of the Human Colonial Council and the Galactic Species Alliance. Your work here has fundamentally changed how we approach interspecies relations." "Thank you, Admiral. But the real credit belongs to Grimm. I just had the good fortune to meet a patient teacher." "Your humility is noted, but don't underestimate your contribution. The Daeho Protocol is now standard training for all diplomatic and first contact teams. We're establishing a new academy for interspecies communication, and we want you to head the program." Daeho looked through the window at the planet below, where Grimm was currently teaching a group of young scientists how to grow food in toxic soil. "I'm honored, Admiral, but my place is here. There's still so much of Grimm's people's knowledge to discover and translate. We understand, and we're not asking you to leave. We want to build the academy there at New Haven Colony. Make it a living laboratory where beings from across the galaxy can learn not just theory, but practical cooperation." The proposal was ambitious beyond anything Daeho had imagined. An interspecies academy, where the most important lessons would be taught by the last survivor of an ancient civilization, with humans serving as bridges between different ways of thinking. "I'll need to discuss this with Grimm," Daeho said carefully. "This is its world, and its decision to make." 3 hours later, Daeho sat with Grimm in their favorite spot overlooking the settlement they had built together. The alien's form had settled into what Daeho thought of as its comfortable shape, resembling a large wolf with silver fur that seemed to hold starlight. "An academy," Grimm said through their now sophisticated translation system, "a place where many species learn to understand each other." "It would mean hundreds of visitors every month," Daeho explained. "Students, teachers, researchers. Your world would become very busy." Grimm was quiet for a long time, watching the sun set through the jungle canopy. Finally, it spoke in the complex harmonic language of its people, which the translator rendered as poetry. "My people built cities to teach wisdom. They traveled between stars to share knowledge. If this academy can prevent the loneliness I have known, if it can help species understand each other before fear makes them enemies, then it honors their memory perfectly." The decision was made. Construction of the New Haven Interspecies Academy began 6 months later. The buildings were grown rather than built, using the living architecture techniques of Grimm's people. Dormitories that purified their own air, classrooms that adjusted their lighting and temperature for the comfort of different species, and laboratories that could adapt to any type of scientific research. On opening day, students arrived from 47 different worlds. Reptilian saurians studied alongside insectoid klaxi. Aquatic cetaceans learned cooperation techniques with gas giant dwelling floaters. And overseeing it all were humans like Daeho, natural diplomats who could understand multiple perspectives and help very different beings find common ground. The Academy's first graduate was a young Kodari named Brondar Jr., son of the security chief who had helped vote for Daeho's exile. He specialized in peaceful resolution of territorial disputes and credited his success to lessons learned from the human who made friends with death itself. Captain Vexhai attended the graduation ceremony, now wearing the insignia of an admiral in the Galactic Peacekeeping Forces. His speech to the graduating class was broadcast throughout known space. 5 years ago, we believed that some species were too dangerous to approach peacefully. We thought that strength and weapons were the only ways to deal with the unknown. One human engineer proved us wrong, not through force or clever arguments, but through simple kindness and the willingness to see a potential friend where others saw only an enemy. In the audience, Kim Daeho felt a mixture of pride and embarrassment at the attention. Beside him, Grimm made the sound that meant amusement in its language. Humans are uncomfortable with praise, Grimm observed through their private communication link. "We prefer to focus on the work still to be done," Daeho replied. Speaking of which, the archaeological team found another intact data vault in the southern continent. "Are you ready for another translation project?" "Always," Grimm responded, its silver eyes bright with the curiosity that had kept its species exploring the galaxy for millennia. As the graduation ceremony ended and new students prepared to begin their studies, Daeho reflected on the strange path that had brought him here. He had been abandoned on a death world as punishment for breaking rules. Instead, he had found a friend, discovered knowledge that was changing the galaxy, and helped create a new way for different species to understand each other. The quarterly reports that arrived from across the galaxy told the story of this transformation. Peaceful contacts with 17 previously hostile species. 3 dead worlds restored to life using Grimm's biotechnology. 2 major interstellar conflicts resolved through communication rather than warfare. But perhaps the most important change was harder to measure. Throughout the galaxy, beings were learning to approach the unknown with curiosity rather than fear, to look for friends where they had once seen only enemies. Dr. Yoon Minji approached Daeho as the ceremony crowd began to disperse. The Council of Species has approved funding for 3 more academies on different worlds. They want to use the New Haven model across the galaxy. And the Temporal Research Division has made an interesting discovery, Admiral Vexhai added, joining their conversation. They've been studying the plague that wiped out Grimm's species. It wasn't natural. It was a biological weapon created by an extinct species that feared Grimm's people were becoming too powerful. Daeho felt a chill run through him. So Grimm's people were killed because other species were afraid of them. Exactly the kind of mistake we're working to prevent now, Vexhai replied. The Academy's mission is more important than we realized. We're not just teaching cooperation, we're teaching survival. That evening, as the 3 moons of Kepler 442c rose over New Haven Colony, Daeho and Grimm walked through the gardens they had planted together so many months ago. The plants glowed softly in the moonlight, a living testament to the beauty that could be created when different forms of life worked in harmony. Do you ever regret it? Daeho asked quietly. All the changes, all the visitors? Sometimes I think you might prefer the quiet solitude we had in the beginning. Grimm considered the question carefully before responding. I was alone for 5 years after my people died. I thought loneliness was my punishment for surviving when they could not. But you? Director Kim Daeho's ship traveled for 3 weeks through hyperspace to reach the Outer Rim, where the exploration fleet had discovered another survivor of Grimm's species. The journey gave him time to study the preliminary reports and prepare for what might be a very different encounter than his first meeting with Grimm. This survivor called itself Sorrow, and it had been alone on the dead world of Zerion 7 for 130 years. Unlike Grimm, who had lived on a jungle world full of life, Sorrow had survived on a planet where nothing grew, and the very atmosphere was toxic to most forms of life. Captain Park Ji-won, the human commander of the exploration vessel Bright Hope, met Daeho at the docking bay with troubling news. Director, we've been in communication with Sorrow for 2 weeks now, but it's very different from your friend Grimm. This one seems angry, suspicious, and deeply traumatized by its years of isolation. Tell me about the world it's been living on, Daeho requested as they walked through the ship's corridors. Zerion 7 was once a beautiful ocean world, home to billions of Sorrow's people. But something happened there during the plague years. The entire planet was sterilized, turned into a wasteland. Sorrow survived by hiding in deep underground bunkers, but everyone else died. They reached the communication center where Dr. Han Yeji, the ship's xenobiologist, was monitoring the long-range transmissions to the planet below. Sorrow has been sending us the same message for days, Dr. Han explained. It wants to know why we're here, what we want from it, and why it should trust any spacefaring species after what happened to its world. Daeho studied the translated messages on the screen. Unlike Grimm's curious and eventually friendly communications, these were filled with pain, anger, and deep mistrust of outsiders. It keeps asking about something called the Cleansers, Captain Park noted, some group that apparently visited its world just before the plague struck. The Cleansers, Daeho repeated thoughtfully. Grimm mentioned them once. They were a species that believed the galaxy was becoming too crowded, too chaotic. They thought the solution was to eliminate civilizations they considered dangerous or unnecessary. Dr. Han looked up from her console in shock. You think they were responsible for the plague that wiped out Grimm's people? It's possible. And if Sorrow was there when it happened, if it saw its entire civilization destroyed by these cleansers, then it has every reason to hate and fear other species. The implications were sobering. Grimm had been lonely and sad after losing its people, but Sorrow had been traumatized by watching them die. It had spent over a century alone with its grief and rage, with no one to help it heal. Director, Captain Park said quietly, Are you sure it's safe to make contact? This creature has survived alone on a dead world for longer than some species have had space travel. It might be too dangerous to approach. Deho thought of his first meeting with Grim, when everyone believed the creature was an unstoppable killer. The most dangerous beings are often the ones who are in the most pain. If we can help Sorrow heal, we might save not just one life, but prevent future tragedies. 3 days later, Deho's shuttle descended through the poisonous atmosphere of Zarion 7. The world below was a nightmare landscape of twisted metal and barren rock. Once great cities lay in ruins, their towers melted by some terrible weapon that had turned an ocean world into a desert. The shuttle landed near the coordinates Sorrow had provided, next to what appeared to be the entrance to an underground complex. The air outside was toxic, so Deho wore a full environmental suit as he approached the bunker entrance. "Sorrow," he called through his suit's communication system. "My name is Kim Deho. I'm here alone, as we agreed. I want to talk with you." The entrance opened with a grinding sound of ancient machinery. Beyond lay a tunnel that descended deep into the planet's crust, lit by the same glowing crystals that Grimm's people had used in their technology. Deho walked down the tunnel for nearly an hour before reaching a vast underground chamber. Here, Sorrow waited for him, and the sight took his breath away. Where Grim was graceful and beautiful, Sorrow was a creature shaped by rage and pain. Its body was larger and more angular, covered in what looked like natural armor that had grown thicker over the decades. Its eyes burned not with silver light, but with deep red fire that spoke of anger held too long. "So," Sorrow said in the harmonic language of its species, "another human comes to my dead world. Are you here to finish what the cleansers started?" "I'm here because I have a friend of your species," Deho replied calmly. "Grim survived the plague on Kepler 442c. It has been teaching my people and others about the wisdom of your civilization." Sorrow's burning eyes narrowed with suspicion. "Impossible. I felt the last of my people die over a century ago. There are no others. There is at least one other. And through Grim, we've learned that your people were teachers and healers, not the threats the cleansers believed them to be." "The cleansers," Sorrow spat, its voice filled with hatred that had festered for over a century. "They came to our world speaking of peace and cooperation. They said they wanted to learn from us. Then they released their plague and watched us die." Deho felt sick hearing the story, but he forced himself to remain calm. "I'm sorry for what happened to your people. No one deserved that fate." "Sorry?" Sorrow's laugh was bitter and harsh. "Your species builds weapons just like theirs. You explore the galaxy taking what you want just like they did. Why should I believe you're any different?" "Because," Deho said simply, "I'm not armed. I came here alone and I'm asking for your help." "Help with what?" "We've built an academy where different species learn to understand each other. Grim teaches there, sharing the knowledge of your people. But there are still conflicts in the galaxy. Still species that fear each other unnecessarily. Your experience, painful as it is, could help us prevent future tragedies." Sorrow circled around Deho slowly, its massive form moving with predatory grace. "You want me to teach peace to the same kinds of beings who murdered my people? I want you to help us make sure it never happens again." For a long moment, the only sound in the vast chamber was the distant hum of the life support systems that had kept Sorrow alive for over a century. "Show me," Sorrow said finally. "Show me this friend of yours. Show me this academy. If what you say is true, if there really is another survivor of my people, then perhaps there is reason to hope." "I can't transport you directly to New Haven Colony," Deho explained. "You've been exposed to the toxic atmosphere of this world for too long. But we can establish a communication link. You can speak with Grim directly." It took 6 hours to set up the quantum communication array that would allow real-time conversation across the galaxy. When the connection finally stabilized, Grim's familiar harmonic voice filled the chamber. "Brother of sorrow, sister of pain," Grim said in the formal greeting of their species. "I thought I walked alone in the darkness between stars." Sorrow's burning eyes filled with what might have been tears. "Brother of memory, keeper of dreams. I believed the songs of our people had fallen silent forever." The two survivors spoke in their own language for hours, sharing memories of their dead civilization and the pain of their long isolation. Deho listened through his translator, understanding only fragments but feeling the deep emotion in every exchange. Finally, Grim spoke in the common language so Deho could understand. "My friend, you were right to bring us together. Sorrow carries wounds that I cannot heal alone, but together we might find a way forward. "What do you need from me?" Deho asked. "Time," Sorrow replied. "Time to remember who my people were before the cleansers came. Time to learn if the galaxy has truly changed since those dark days. And hope," Grim added. "Hope that the future can be different from the past." Over the following months, Sorrow slowly emerged from its underground fortress. The process of decontamination and medical treatment took weeks, but eventually, the ancient survivor was healthy enough to travel to New Haven Colony. The reunion between Grim and Sorrow was emotional beyond words. They were the last two members of a species that had once numbered in the billions, finding each other after decades of believing they were alone in the universe. But Sorrow's integration into the Academy was not easy. The creature that had survived on hatred and suspicion for over a century could not immediately learn to trust. Several times, Sorrow's rage flared when dealing with species that reminded it of the cleansers. "This is harder than I expected," Deho admitted to Dr. Yoon Minji after a particularly difficult session where Sorrow had threatened a group of visiting diplomats. "Trauma takes time to heal," Minji replied, "especially trauma that deep and that old. But Sorrow is trying, and that's what matters." The breakthrough came when a young student, a member of the aquatic cetacean species, approached Sorrow with a simple question about loss and grief. The student had lost its entire family in a mining accident and was struggling with survivor's guilt. Something in the young being's pain touched Sorrow's heart. For the first time since arriving at the Academy, the ancient survivor spoke not from anger but from compassion. "The weight of being the only one left is almost unbearable," Sorrow told the student. "But I have learned something important here. We honor the dead not by carrying their pain forever, but by making sure their dreams live on in others."